amid those tensions rising in the Middle East. And we're hearing reporting from Edward Lawrence saying the Situation Room meeting had lasted about an hour and 20 minutes, but it came to a conclusion. Also, another post saying the White House official telling him the meeting with the national security advisors in the Situation Room starting soon. They talked about strikes inside Iran on targets, likely the facility where Iran has its nuclear program. Strikes are on the table. Let's bring into the conversation right now senior fellow with JINSA and former national security advisor under Vice President Dick Cheney, John Hannah. John, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. What type of conversations went on inside of that Situation Room, and what are they talking about in relation to potential strikes against Iran?
Thanks for having me, Andy. I think they're clearly looking now at real live options for U.S. intervention on Israel's side to go after these Iranian nuclear sites, particularly that deepest, most important nuclear uranium enrichment site that the Iranians have at Fordow, built several hundred feet under the ground, under reinforced concrete that only U.S. bunker-busting bombs can get to, delivered by U.S. strategic bombers that Israel doesn't have. There's also a need. Israel's over the skies of Iran constantly, destroying missiles, destroying other nuclear sites, destroying military leadership sites. They have a lot of planes in the air, a long distance from Israel to sustain that kind of pace of operations. They could really use some advanced U.S. aerial refueling capabilities, probably over the skies of Iraq, that Israel also doesn't have, that would dramatically enhance its ability to keep its Air Force in the air 24/7.
It's very interesting because we continue to hear some of those assets being moved into the region. And this is the graphic from Fox that we are seeing just all around there in the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, just the amount of force, the posture in which the United States continues to have in that region. They're continuing to call it a defensive posture. When will it look offensive? And can you describe maybe what we're seeing in terms of just the amount there in the region?
Yeah, no, it's already been several months, Andy, that the president has been, as he engages in these negotiations to coerce Iran into making a deal and giving up its nuclear program peacefully. He's been building up a very credible military deterrent in the region. And now, as we get closer to this decision to actually enter the fray on Israel's side to really try and finish this job in a decisive manner, the president's only now adding new increments of force, new increments of defensive and, importantly, offensive firepower to be ready for anything.
I want to ask you what a potential strike would look like. You mentioned Fordow. That would be the nuclear site that is very hard to get at. What would a strike potentially look like? Is that the best option that you potentially think could happen?
I think it's the most important contribution the United States can make. It's the one thing that, even as ingenious as the Israeli Defense Forces are, presents real serious challenges to them. Could be done much more effectively, that deep enrichment at site at Fordow, by the United States, by several B-2 bombers carrying this massive ordnance penetrators, 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs that were built specifically for this mission to penetrate that mountain at Fordow. That would get the job done quickest. Hopefully, it would be a one and done, and then the Israeli Air Force would continue their mission to further degrade the rest of Iran's nuclear and missile infrastructure. But we can't just assume that the Iranians are going to just accept a blow and move to the sidelines. We've got to be prepared for everything, including them coming after a lot of our forces in the region that are based both in Iraq and Syria and places around the Persian Gulf. We already see a lot of U.S. naval ships beginning to move out of the base in Manama, Bahrain, moving out, dispersing into the Persian Gulf to be in a safer defensive posture.
Yeah, and President Trump was asked aboard Air Force One last night about that, the potential retaliation from Iran, depending on what the strike looks like. I do want to ask you, just based on this, if the U.S. does make this preemptive strike, does that mean the United States is at war, or do they take a step back immediately in the aftermath?
Well, I mean, we've got to be careful about the word war, because people tend to conflate, the large-scale ground campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 25 years, which were genuine large-scale wars to take down regimes, to try and build some replacement. This is entirely, as far as we can tell, besides a lot of Mossad agents on the ground in Iran, entirely an air campaign. Going down an extensive target list to set back these two existential issues for both Israel and the United States in terms of Iran's nuclear capacity and its missile capacity, that are a threat to us and a threat to the entire international order in the Middle East, that we have great stake in. Obviously, it's the epicenter of world energy supplies and the global economy. So there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, and we spoke with one of your colleagues over there, JINSA, about the report over the weekend that President Trump vetoed an Israeli plan to take out Iran's supreme leader. And then we saw this post earlier on today on Truth Social saying that they know exactly where the Ayatollah is at this point. In your eyes, if they decided to take out the Ayatollah Khamenei with a strike or something, because apparently they know exactly where he is, does that mean the regime is gone? And does the U.S. support a complete regime change there in Iran?
Well, if you start going after the very top political decision maker in a country, it probably looks like you've got intentions other than simply destroying its nuclear and missile programs. You're certainly destroying whatever chance you have of getting a decision, probably to come back to the table to surrender that nuclear program. You're setting that cause back, and you may be looking at a wider military objective of actually changing the regime. Listen, Iran is a very deep, expansive state of civilization. It's institutionalized, this Islamic revolution. There are a lot of bad, hard men in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, probably prepared to step up and take control of this regime and kill a lot of people in the streets if they try to rise up and replace the Islamic Republic. I don't think this is simply taking one person out and then thinking we're going to have some kind of much better, improved system. Hopefully we do. Hopefully we're making preparations to try as best we can to work with friends in Iran, friendly forces who can help shape a better future. But ultimately, whatever happens inside of Iran, I think we've learned over the last 20, 25 years, has got to be left to those people on the ground in Iran to shape their own future, to take their own hands into their destiny. We can help a lot and further advance their cause and go against the people who are most likely to kill them if they were to somehow rise up and take their future into their own hands. But it's very hard for us to own the future of Iran and what any new regime might look like.
And we've hopefully learned some lessons from past conflicts there that hopefully don't get involved in that way. We're talking internationally, but back here at home, we just heard that story from Rebecca Castor talking about Congress hoping to potentially get involved for approval of a potential strike on Iran. Does Congress need approval for President Trump to go forward with a potential strike?
My guess is no, is that the president's got the power under his Article 2 to undertake this kind of limited, contained strike to destroy a particular nuclear site and project that poses a obviously growing and quite immediate near-term threat to the United States and our interests in the Middle East. But I do think anything that extends beyond that, if the Iranians begin attacking our forces in the Middle East, trying to widen this war, to go after international energy supplies. I think it's very urgent that the president take this to the American people very quickly, to explain his actions, to talk to the Congress, to build real support for why he sees and understands this operation, as did four of his immediate predecessors, both Republican and Democratic, saying stopping this Iranian nuclear project as being in the vital interests of the United States of America, our safety and our security. So important for the president, whatever he does in the coming hours and days, to eventually, very quickly, take his justifications and rationales and reasoning to the American people for why this is very much directly in their political, security, and economic interests.
Yeah, and the decision will likely lie exactly with President Trump, as the former president said the buck stops with him, so it likely will stop with him on this potential strike. I do want to ask you, because it's so very fascinating, we talk about all the different intelligence community, the military operations inside of the Situation Room. Can you take us a little bit inside? What type of voices, who is President Trump listening to in a Situation Room like that? What type of information is he getting?
The intelligence community is clearly at the forefront in a situation like this, Andy, both telling him what's happened over the last 4 or 5 days in terms of this Israeli military campaign. What is the bomb damage assessment? How much have they set back different elements of the Iranian nuclear program? What is happening at that site at Fordow right now? Do we see the Iranians trying to move in anything? What do we know about how the Iranians will respond to any American entry into this war and attack on Fordow? What are their intentions? Will they really try and start going after U.S. forces? And then he's got to look to his military people to know what options we would have under these different possible contingencies and ways that Iran would respond. What are our vulnerabilities? What measures are being taken to protect our forces, to protect our citizens across the Middle East? And then, of course, the State Department, we've got to be building coalitions internationally to be supportive of what we're doing. We've got to be prepared to go out to governments around the world, talk and justify our actions, why we're taking these actions, why they should be supportive of us. And so it's very much, and of course you're always worried on the economic side about our vulnerability and to an energy shock, to what could happen if, in fact, Iran begins to go after the Strait of Hormuz, to try and go after Saudi oil facilities. What would happen in energy markets? And what contingencies do we have available to try and buffer that any kind of shock and effect it would have on the American economy and the American consumer? So it's a genuinely an all-of-government approach to try and inform the president as best you can and equip him with the kind of information he needs to make this very lonely decision that, as you said, is ultimately one man's alone, whether or not to enter what could be a sustained conflict against a very, very serious and dangerous foe.
And like you mentioned, the aftershock will be felt one way or another. So we're going to see, we're going to watch and wait, as it seems pretty calm right now, but it could change in the blink of an eye. All right, John, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time, your insight here on Live Now.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Be well.
Right. Thank you so much. All right, great conversation there, as always, as we're following the latest in terms of the ongoing, the escalating tensions in the region with Iran, with Israel. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this.